W2AV Talk with Demetris Curry. Here's your gateway to discovering the formula to a more gratifying life with the accountability you need to start and stay energized, inspired, and on top. Author and wealth strategist Demetris Curry is a nationally leading voice and go-to authority on insurance and financial literacy. Got questions about your finances, relationships, healthy living, or professional life? W2AV talks about it all, along with tips to enhance your overall well-being. W2AV Talk with Demetris Curry.
Hello, everyone. This is Demetris Curry coming to you today with W2AV Talk Authors Unite edition. And we are ecstatic to be bringing to you another edition of Authors Unite with a wonderful author here in the US. Before we get started, I want to first say this. Authors Unite was brought about to get to know the authors behind the scenes, behind their wonderful pieces of work and their art that they have put to the forefront. And we want to know about that author. Who are they? And where did the information come from? Was it experiences? Was it trials or testimonials in their lifetime that made them feel that their book of work or their art was important enough to put it on paper? And so today we are so ecstatic to have none other than author Scott Knight with us. He is the mind-boggling author, oh my goodness, of online book, art, and poetry. And let me tell you, raised in Montgomery, Alabama, he is well known for his pieces of work in the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement as his foundation of bringing in some really extravagant art. And I have seen this work and I was just blown away. And I said, you know what? I have to talk to him. I have to get to know him and know exactly what brought all of this about. Time traveler journey. I am just ecstatic to learn more about it. So before I go any further, let me just bring him to the forefront. Scott, are you there?
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Thank you so much for being here with us today with Authors Unite. I'm ecstatic. And I was looking at your work and I said, before I jump into his work, well, let's just get to know Scott. Let's get to know him a little bit more, because with some of the stuff that you have out there, I was just like, wow. I mean, really just amazing poetry. And I've always loved poetry. I've been a poetry person. So I'm just really excited about what you're doing. But Scott, tell us about you. Who are you and what made you bring this to the forefront?
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and thank you for what you're doing for authors and all the authors that are uniting. But just a little bit about me. I'm a 20-year retired firefighter from here in the city of Montgomery. So I was able to be promoted and retired as an arson investigator. But one of the things that kind of led me to this was I began writing this in like 2008. And at first it was just a way to vent. For me, being in the fire department, I had been in the fire department approximately 11 years. I had just gotten married, so different things was going on in my life. So just venting, but definitely as an outlet for first responders as mental health. This was a stress reliever for me.
Gotcha.
But I just started putting a couple of pieces together and, got some positive feedback. And then after a while or a few years, just was determined on trying to put enough together to have a book. And this is what I put together, A Time Traveler's Journal.
Yes, and I love the cover.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
And that kind of represents all of us, even me. That's a dictation of me in there in the time machine. But us, from the time we're born until the time we die, we are time travelers. from decade to decade, even, and we're just taking on the information and the experiences to tell others, even the information that we learn from our parents, grandparents, great grandparents, which is known as the family tree.
That's right. That's right.
Or from history lessons, what we research on our own to find out what is the truth. So that is kind of a synopsis of how we got to a time traveler's journal.
Wow, wow. And I know that the title itself is what drew me. I was like, wait a minute. Did I hear time traveler? It drew me in, but you mentioned something that I think is very profound in what you're talking about, is the ability to keep your mental health, and how you used it to help create that mental health space for yourself and vent to get it out. And you had so much stuff out there. I was looking at one of the products that you had was the time machine. Yes. And I said, oh, that time machine is serious.
Yes.
That's serious business right there. Tell us more about your mental health and how that helped you get through some of those things that you're going through at that time as a firefighter.
Well, each piece, and I don't have it in the book, but I have it in my original notes of the time when I started writing it, and even some of them when I finished, because it was all a work in art, ongoing. Yes. One thing too, very, I guess, religious or spiritual. One of my heroes, Nat Turner, which when I was in elementary, that's how I began to find out about Nat Turner, because we always had, of course, Black History Month.
Right.
So we got February, everybody got Martin Luther King, everybody got Rosa Parks, Malcolm X. I just tried to find someone different, and I found Nat Turner. He was such a hero to me, because understanding him being a preacher or being spiritual, and his revolution or revolt that he took on. So being in that space of being led by the Father to commit this violent act. But it was for a rising of a people, and how he got done just to keep his name from even being heard again. It was successful. The time machine also speaks to the church bombing in Birmingham for little girls. So from what we've been through as to get even playing ground, playing field, to understand how far behind we are as a people. And that was one of the things that I wanted to kind of have as a platform, that we need history from our ancestors who are still living, and to be able to trace our own roots. One thing that we get to find as we travel through time, if we, research our own history, is that our family has been brought to a certain level, regardless of the struggles in the past, but someone in our family has been brought to a certain level, and it's our job to maintain that level and to go above, not to go backwards. So just speaking to that, the time machine itself in the book, it begins a different part of the book, and I guess I'll explain that a little bit later, but just this piece itself, it is as you see the illustration, the time machine with the time traveler in it. But even speaking about the Ku Klux Klan, the Crips and Blood should team up together. Speaking about even past and present times of being skipped for promotion. Even social with, yes, the water fountains. This is for Blacks, this is for whites. Still here in historic Montgomery, the water fountain or the placard still stands. And I remember my mother telling me herself as a child, sneaking to taste the water and said, it ain't taste no different. So these are the things that we want to pass on and make sure that we touch or hear from those people who actually experience those things during those times.
Yeah. That's amazing, because that's one thing I always had conversations with clients when I'm talking about history is, if you look around us, history is around us every single day. You know, if you look at trees, if you ever thought about looking at these huge, large trees like oak trees and things of that nature, and you know, the older the trees get, they have those rings that's on the inside of the tree that represents, you know, how many amount of years that tree has been in life. And one of the things that I always felt intriguing is being able to see that there is trees that's out there, 100 and 200 years old of trees that have been standing for many years. And the things that they may have seen in history and our people and the things they've witnessed in history of our people, is mind-boggling, you know, of what that particular tree could say, if it had words to say, if it had verbs that it could, you know, pronounce, or adverbs that it could use to talk about the history of our people, of what it's seen. Even train tracks, you know, every once in a while you go down some of these smaller towns and they still have those train tracks that's been there for centuries, right? And those train tracks are what they could say they've seen, or the history within those tracks of our people and the devastation that it has been there to actually be in presence of. Or even, you know, the late night cries, or the running, or any of that in slavery, any of that was actually going on at that time. Those tracks, those trees were a witness to. And so I sort of draw into poetry in that way. I told you I'm a poetry person. So I draw into poetry in that way, of the history of where our people are. You know, you made a really, really good point when you were talking about your grandma and how she had the wisdom and the try to get some strength about herself, to try to get some of that water and see if it tastes different. Right?
That was my mother. Yes, my mother.
That was your mom. I mean, that's crazy, because I remember my grandma used to talk about that all the time, as far as, you know, don't do this, you know, don't do that, you know, don't talk this way, or don't look at him straight in the face, or, you know, when you see what I'm saying, or it's yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, regardless, you know, all of that plays into who we've been sort of molded to be through history, because of the experiences that our ancestors have actually had to go through and so forth. So to be able to just not just recognize it, but to teach others about it, and keep that history moving, so people can understand where they came from. Yes. You know what I mean? And to know their roots is crazy.
One point to just add to that is one thing about mental health. All right. Dealing with, and I was fortunate enough to be in the fire department where they still had some of the older units, older pumpers, older equipment. Gotcha. So to hold a piece of hose and you know, have to think, did they hit some of my people? But seriously, now I've had a conversation with a district fire chief who made it to one of the administrative fire chiefs. But we had a conversation one night, you know, we just around the firehouse, and he told me of a time when he was at the fire station at the one in Chisholm, Montgomery, where he was awakened by fellow firefighters with a gun, a rifle in his face. So, you know, when we speak of these things and transitioning and, you know, becoming segregated and everything opening up to not being segregated, some of the things that our people had to go through and keep a good face and show strength and, the mental part that they had to deal with even then.
Right.
So, like I said, to hear this from a Black district fire chief was, eye-opening, because sometimes you may come in and think somebody just got it, you understand, not understanding until you hear what they had to go through.
Right. The history of pushing through.
Yes,
isn't that our mantra though? We push through.
It speaks to just being in touch with yourself spiritually too, on our people then, how we gain strength from being spiritually led, how dark and grim we show unity, we show togetherness, we show how smart, how intelligent we are. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you again for us Authors United.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I feel like your story is so powerful, and I'm honored that we actually had the opportunity to talk to you on it, because there are children here today that they don't get a chance to really understand history the way we got a chance to understand history, but knowing that your history doesn't necessarily determine your future.
Correct.
You have to really be able to put things in a certain perspective of knowing your foundation, right? Knowing your foundation and building on it, building on that particular foundation. Yeah.
One thing, I got a piece in here called Bridging the Gap. And in it, I got 2 definitions, and it's also dedicated. It's dedicated to the remembrance of the 9 victims and 3 survivors of the hate crime on June 17th, 2015 at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina. But just in what you're saying, one of the definitions, bridging the gap, passing on important knowledge of instilling the foundation in your child, a child, or any human being, whatever place they are in on their journey of life, to understand the tombstone dash. Situations are going to occur in your life, and you will have to account for the way you deal with them, bridging the gap between prior being here to leaving here.
Wow.
So the second definition, I think, hits what we're talking about, bridging the gap, educating the youth properly on how things began to where they are now, including the struggles, bloodshed, and corruption of this country that is not being taught to them. So one point, like, if we're going to talk about hate and what color people are, or crimes and things, we speaking of what I just spoke about, South Carolina. And that'll bring us fast forward to January 6th. Okay. What color were those people? Now, between those events or any protest from even before Dr. King said, "I have a dream." Here in Alabama, walking from Selma or marching from Selma for these equal rights, civilly protesting, our people got beat. So how come January 6th, if a group of people come and attack or have a terrorist attack on the Capitol, what happens to them?
John, very, very good question.
So if we're bridging the gap, and that's all we want to do, and we raising questions. It's not for me to make the decision on what's right or wrong, but I want to bridge the gap. I want to have a time traveler's journal and document.
There you go. To say, hey, well, back in time, and what's going on right now is questionable.
and I don't mean to interrupt you, but just to make another point, 9/11, we just had the celebration this 2021.
Yeah.
9/11 occurred. The country was very, very united. This terrorist attack happened January 6th. And I'm going to leave it right there. Get united.
Hey, and at Authors Unite. And see, you know, you're making me laugh till I cry, because quite honestly, it's like, you know, there is so much that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? So much that we see and we can't individually fix, right? It takes us pulling together to talk about the issues, to address the issues, and to come up with plans of how to transform
rationally. Dr. King, non-violently. And we have to be our media, just like what we're saying. If my little synopsis could be a time, just play that for the media. When things occur, let's go back to some facts on what has already happened, and we've gotten over that hurdle. So when we address this current thing, let's bring that back up and say, hey, this is how we handle it. This shouldn't even be.
Yeah. And these are the changes that
let's make it plain and simple.
Right. Then they say, write it down, make it plain.
Let's go.
Write it down, make it plain. And I think that with what you've done with your Time Traveler's Journal, is just like, wow. It is a wonderful piece of work to get into the hands of not only the adults, but our youth. And I know you do some things in the community where you work with the youth and so forth, and get it out and everything. How have you seen that change some of the students, some of the kids? They get a chance to learn more, something they didn't know before.
Well, it's just eye-opening. Like, if you didn't know it had been done before, then it would be that much harder for you. If you know someone has written a book, then you tagging along, hey, how do I just put my little notes together and I can write a book? When you say write it down, make it plain, that's what I tried to do. That's what we as Authors Uniting trying to do when we tell it from a perspective.
Right.
I was so proud of myself, and I gave myself a pat on the back. My mother edited my book for me, proofread it. And I thank her for her education, her years of working with the state and what she did. I only have one cuss word, if you consider ASS a cuss word, in the book. But I wanted to come from a platform where anyone could read it and not be offended. So when you say be able to speak to the youth, speaking from each piece in here, like I said, it's only one cuss word, and it's referencing a donkey. And that's what my mother said. That's in the Bible. So very happy with that.
Yes.
So being able to talk to the youth, if you have a reading session. For some of our youth, a male just reading is new. So just touching them on reading, it doesn't have to be a landmark difference. But the consistency, like I stated earlier, if you've never seen someone write a book, so now it goes from reading or knowing your ABCs to putting these letters together and relaying your thought.
That's true. And as a father, have you had the opportunity to sit down with your child? I think your child is 7 years old.
Yes.
And I don't know if this is too young for them to learn some of this information, but have you had a chance to talk about this?
We've talked about it, and it is on their level,
okay,
so to speak. Her mother and her have a great relationship, and I commend her mother for being able to get those key information in to speak from a woman's perspective on addressing people touching your hair. So those kind of things on boundaries, and these are your friends, but at the same time, we got to set boundaries early. So no matter who they are, no matter who they look like, we're setting boundaries, because if I tell you stop, I mean that no matter who you are.
Right. Right. That's right. And you said hair. I started laughing about that because I remember my mom telling me many years ago, a lady tried to touch her hair in the grocery store and didn't ask her, just like, she's like, hold up. I don't know you like that. Me touching my hair.
You are in your right.
Yeah.
You are in your right as a human being, because we're talking about humanity.
Yes. Yes. That's amazing. That's amazing. You draw in some really valid points there. I love it. I love it. I can't wait to get your book. I want to read it. I want to go ahead and dissect it. Now, I've been on your website like a junkie, you know.
Okay, cool. TimeTravelingNASA.com.
Yes, but I want a signed copy. I'm like,
I have them available with me now. I have a few copies left on hand. So if you come to town, let me know, or you get yours, you let me know when you are in town. I sign it. We can do something definitely live. Hopefully.
Wonderful.
I can have a speaking event going on or something.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. But I'm so excited for you. We've had some great conversations about what is going on and where we came from in the community, because I too grew up in Montgomery and know that history, and you know it made me stronger. But there are some people that it sort of hurt mentally in some ways, and so to be able to take that and help people build on it, to give them strength, to let them know that they come from a people of strength.
Correct.
Is fantastic.
Well, just a little bit what you speaking on. From Montgomery, I had the fortune of going to the Cleveland Avenue YMCA.
Did you? Oh,
yes.
Okay.
There, you know, being in that environment, was fortunate to experience a lot. Even having Dr. J, Julius Irvin, come to that Y for one Father's Day event that they had.
Wow.
So, you know, the people that I was around being taught by Jeff Jones, he was the top head lifeguard.
Yes.
He taught me and my group of friends how to be a lifeguard. We were certified lifeguards before we were really teenagers at a young age. From that, even talking with my brother the other day, we have a doctor. His name is Reagan. I can't remember his last name right now, but at UAB in Birmingham. So just speaking of the history, like I said, Cleveland Avenue Y, for those that don't know, ran alongside Rosa L. Parks, the historic street that Miss Parks was named after. Yes,
and my first instance, I lived on South Court Street. Ooh,
okay,
what you know
go
about
ahead
South
with your bad stuff.
What you know about South Court Street?
Come on,
yes, that was back in the day. Bellingraph Junior High School. Yes, sir. I mean, all the areas that, you know, were, I would say harder to actually live in at that time. It was really, really a harder area to live in, but it gave some amazing people came out of that. I mean, a lot of our classmates and Some of our friends, even today, they have gone on and done extraordinary things. You know, you are an epitome of that. You know, you're an example of that, of going on and doing extraordinary things and touching lives in so many ways that you would have never dreamed of. So I am proud of you. I'm ecstatic that you're doing what you're doing. And I'm glad that you're taking something that could have been looked at in a bad way of, you know, the history itself, and to transform it into something that's going to be, you know, literacy, you know, understanding who you are, getting past those points, those obstacles, those circumstances that you think are not possible, and those different avenues of giving it to them in book form and poetry, and you know, I just love it. I just absolutely love it. So I appreciate everything that you're doing, and so I want to make sure that our audience that's listening to us today have the opportunity to get your books of work. Where is the best place for them to connect with you?
The best place to connect with me is timetravelingnasa.com, where you're able to go to a link that takes you to Amazon to order the book. On my website also, you're able to order individual pieces that you can put in your house as artwork, where you have the illustration and the manuscript combined. Coming soon, it should be this t-shirt available, and I'm working on a possible clothing line deal right now. I don't want to say too much right now, but
am I going to get a t-shirt with my book?
We'll talk about that, Ms. Curry. But definitely some things coming to fruition, hopefully. The audio book coming soon also. That's one thing that I wanted to make sure that people had, like what you're doing now, just having listeners. Yes. So to be able to have the book. And speaking of the book, like I stated, is 14 individual pieces. Mm-hmm. The beginning and ending with what I call spiritual pieces with recognizing God, which is like we talked about, the bridging the gap is one that ends it. We open up with the Lord's weapon, and it's just my little mantra, count on what we're talking about. For me, even with writing and venting, I took on a spiritual kind of path where I had to just read some scripture first and even meditate on what I had read, and then I was able to kind of open up and be more free on my writing. So once I started like that, it just took its own shape. So like I said,
you're so right.
Just speaking on it, like I said, the opening piece, the Lord's weapon, then it's followed by a young poet's virginity, which is just on its own has a dual meaning. For the illustration is a female in a chastity belt. But for me, it speaks on how I am when I do a piece the first time or anytime, live or just trying to work out the kinks, so to speak. So that's a young poet's virginity. And moving along into Sooner or Later, one of those aggressive pieces, I guess, so to speak, just a frustrated kind of perspective. But what we're doing, and even my production team with the audiobook, what we're doing is something groundbreaking or new, like you spoke on. And what we're trying to do is change the dynamic on it. You have different versions of spoken word. You have slam poetry. Even what I think her name, Amanda Gore, Miss Gore, who did a wonderful job at the presidential inauguration.
Yeah.
What we want to do is more of trap poetry, so to speak. So if it's something on the lines of T.I. when he first, or what he does, the trap music, it's for a group of people that we might not be rapping, we might not this brand or style that we write might not fit the slam or the mainstream or what Amanda may do, but we have that in us. But this is from a perspective of growing up this way, like you said, in this environment.
Yeah.
Growing up on Rosa Parks or going to Cleveland Avenue Y and understanding that this is a historical side of town. Why is it undeveloped? From an economical standpoint. St. Jude, where
oh my goodness, don't even start there.
In, you know, how the city or whoever the powers that be have allowed it to dilapidate. But businesses continue to be built on the east side of town, extending the city limits, nice, clean buildings. Mm-hmm. But can't we come up with some kind of dialogue to clean up the other side? Or, hey, just put a little, maybe market-like Walmart on Federal Drive. If you don't have a full-blown, have a little market.
So you're talking about that economic development of making sure that the historical sides of the town and of the counties actually, maintain and continue to grow and things of that nature. That is a really big issue, especially in historical areas where they start to, fall apart even more from not having any of those economic dollars going into that side of town. And that within itself is part of that journal of, making sure that we are investing back into our communities and taking care of our people, and to be able to tell them how to develop, how to actually start their businesses there, how to support each other's businesses, how to, all of that is part of what you're talking about as far as the economic development of how to, move forward. It takes a village.
And that speaks to us being time travelers on understanding as we go back and do our history. This is what the 40 acres and a mule.
That's right.
This is what Black Wall Street was destroyed about. Because whenever we begin to get on our feet, or Dr. King would say, pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, we got to get some shoes first.
We got to cover the bottom.
So
absolutely. Absolutely. See, we can stay on this topic all day because I'm all about financial stability.
That is what we speak about. Avenues like you're trying to do with Authors Unite, but speaking about financial education that we haven't been taught. So we got to get these topics understood on how they play a part in the underdevelopment.
Yes, in the underdevelopment.
How come they should be sending some of that East Chase money or development to the West Side, because it is key that we keep this developed. If we don't tell the story or the history, it won't be told, or be told incorrectly.
Or incorrectly. And that's exactly what's true. If we don't talk about it, it'll fade off, and we'll have to actually, try to recoup and try to fix it later. And it may be too late to fix it later. It takes a village. And that's what I was saying earlier, is that all of this takes a village to do. It takes, not just you and I, but the beginning of conversations abroad to actually pull this thing together.
Yes, ma'am.
So I can already see what you got going on, what you doing over there. You acting clean up.
I'm trying. But that's like one of the frustrating pieces sooner or later, because it ends up with a perspective of, now I'm talking to the bank teller and ain't no more later.
That's true.
That's true. The frustration. But even, speaking.
That's the frustration part of it. Yeah. And, you brought up a point earlier that I want to touch on real quick is, you're talking about wanting to move forward and change the future. And we were talking about, how do you do that? You know, when I started pulling together Brighter Days Ahead, my book that's coming out, I actually had to do exactly what you did. I had to pray on it first, because so much frustration of, you know, things in time that I had to discuss, anger, you know, frustration, fear, you know, resentment, all of that is built into some of those circumstances. And you know, you have to pray on it before you actually deliver it, so it's delivered the way you want it to be delivered, right?
Yes.
And so what you're doing now is you're delivering it. What you said, you only had one curse word in the book. You're delivering it in such a way where, even though you were going through something mentally frustrating to get it out at that time, you had to bring it down and to sort of get yourself at a level where you can deliver it the way you want it to be delivered. And so that within itself is a challenge. And
Yes.
so I'm glad that you had a chance to do that, because had you not, we would not have the opportunity to witness this work.
I appreciate that, Nick. Like you said, it comes from a lot of faith, a lot of, like I said, not knowing what you're about to do, but having the faith and being led. So even sometimes writing, I know for yourself, when you're alone, you can say it how you want to say it. But that something or somebody else go say, now you know you can't say it like this. So I done had lines, erasers, wore out, you know, when you scratch it through. But
done that several times. Yeah, I've done that several times. Like,
that's where we teach our intelligence, because we replace these words with our vocabulary words.
Yes. And they're like, oh, say, I know I can't say it like that, but that's where I want to say it.
I know it. I got Webster on my phone as an app, because it gives you the definition and then it gives you the synonyms.
You gotta have them synonyms.
So those synonyms, and you can be more descriptive. You can paint a better picture.
Right.
So us using our intelligence that we have to show our intelligence when we deliver something that you cannot, even if you argue with me, you're going to have to take the time and argue with me from a place of humbleness, from a place of intelligence. Because when you start arguing or debating, someone from a distance can't tell who's smarter. I'm not going to say who's a fool. I'm going to say,
don't say
smarter.
That. See, it's all about choices of words.
Our vocabulary.
Word choice and the vocabulary. Absolutely. I'm so excited for you. Thank you so much, Scott, for being here with us today and talking to us about, you know, this history and bringing it to the forefront, groundbreaking work, and, you know, just being in bridging that gap. I mean, it's just amazing what you're doing. And I'm so excited. I can't wait to see what's next. I cannot wait to see what's next. So
hopefully you'll be able to help me with a little more marketing, because that's where I'm at with it too. But like I said, speaking on the book, the Sooner or Later is followed by a piece called Ode to Jazz, which just gets more adultish, I'll say.
Don't you start that now. We got children listening.
In an intelligent manner. But I have also 3 pieces in there that's a trilogy, giving a perspective of Romeo and Juliet.
Okay.
So just giving acknowledgement to William Shakespeare, who's one of my favorite, but just speaking to our intelligence on going in history. It ain't all about badness. It can be some good stuff too, from someone who was recognized as being one of the greatest.
Right.
We'll put our own interpretation on it. So I definitely want people to check out that, especially the romantic at heart. Like I said, it's
it's going to be amazing to see what all, I want to hear the audio. I know that's going to be amazing too. And so that's one of those things, like when you could be working out or doing what you need to do and you just have the audio going. It's just absolutely wonderful.
And it's a mixture. And giving a shout out to Dolomite, one of my favorite poets too, and groundbreaking and innovative, but the audio, some of it is put to music. Some of it is just a cappella, but to put you in that vibe or just have that kind of background to give you an insight of what the audiobook is like. It ain't just me.
See, you have a lot of things coming up. See, I told you I couldn't wait to see what you had coming up.
Hard work and
hard work.
Anyone, like we talking about, I started this book or this journey 2008, just venting. It got published this year, 2021.
Hello.
So now I'm in another phase of it. So anyone, much respect. Don't take for granted patience.
Yes. So, and that's really good advice to give other authors that's listening to us today, whether they are authors that's still working on a piece of work, or maybe they have one in their belly that they have not yet birthed. You know, it's a great way of telling them to not give up on the dream, to push it out, to push it forward. I actually started Brighter Days Ahead back in 2012. And wrote it for the first time in 2012. And since then I've gone back through and I've changed some things and I wanted to sort of wait on putting it out because it was such a personal piece. And it's something like you're giving so much of your experiences, but it was such a personal piece of trials and tribulations and hardships that I actually had to push through in life. And so I was like, I didn't want to put this out until I was emotionally and mentally ready.
That's your baby.
That's my baby.
You could step out there with like naked, so to speak, or undressed.
It's like I didn't want
yours. Even for me, I wanted. Once I wrote it, I had an idea of illustrations to go with it, because I want you to see what was in my head. I want you to know what I'm thinking about as I was writing it. And the author, his name is Rich Richardson, from Alabama. Everything Alabama, all right? World famous, 85 years old. We sat down and would have consultations. Me and him would talk. It wasn't just about me. I was learning about him too, but his ethnicity was different than mine. So us just as human beings, the humanity of it. What he had gone through, he had just lost his wife, I think maybe a year or so prior to me meeting him. She had gone on in death. But he spoke about being with her and just what we just were talking about, Romeo and Juliet, just that love. So when he got to that part, you know, to see it in him and just the energy, like we talking about him being a time traveling, his encounter of Shakespeare and knowing love, and then my interpretation of him reading it and we talking about it. So it's just a time capsule for me. Like, my daughter don't fully understand it, but her hearing me say some things just over and over, because I'm rehearsing it for myself. So she'll say it a certain way or back and forth with me. So not understanding it, but that day when she reads it for herself, or your child, you know what I'm saying?
The arts. And that's the arts of it. Just, and you know, I'm actually a arts child, because I have a arts degree you know, so performing arts. And so with that, I'm like, the art of it just give you chills. I don't know. It just
another standard.
You got to be an artsy person to know what I'm talking about. But if you're an artsy person and you're into, you know, developing of the mind and creativity and things of that nature, and just bringing out something new, different and funky and stuff like that, you know, all of that coming out of you, it just gives a different type of energy. Okay, we can stop right there, because we'll start.
Because you said funky. I want to. That's this side. I want to hear that funky side. That's South Court Street right there.
I told you where my roots came from, right? I told you where my roots came from. And so all of that, you know, being able to bring that to the forefront, and your 7-year-old and my 12-year-old, one day we'll be able to say, oh my goodness, now I understand what mom and dad were talking about. Exactly. And, you know, and they creativity is coming out, and, you know, and that's what makes, I believe, make us a different people, if that makes sense to you. You know what I mean? That creativity is just amazing. We'll go on and on. I'm going to stop right here because I know this right.
That's fine.
But I tell you, Scott, I was so excited we had a chance to talk about this today. And thank you so much for, you know, lending us your time and your heart and your transparency and where it all came from for you, and us getting to know the author behind the author with Authors Unite. I'm so excited for you. So once again, if you have not had the chance to look at Scott's piece of work, make sure that you check out the Time Traveler's Journal. It is amazing. We got to go ahead and get that.
Let me just shout this out. You can hear the second installment of Romeo and Juliet on Spotify.
Oh, you got it on Spotify too. Awesome.
Yes, okay. That one is called I'm in Love with You Too Deep on Spotify.
I'm in Love with You Too Deep on Spotify. Yeah, let's make sure we make a notation of that. And to also visit you, Scott, on timetravelernasa.com, where they can get your pieces of work and be redirected to Amazon and Target and a few other places that you're currently in there. So I'm excited for you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And we have so much more that's going to be coming up with Authors Unite in our next edition. Make sure you stay tuned with us for our next Authors Unite coming your way. Stay tuned.
Thank you for tuning in to W2AV Talk with author and wealth strategist Demetris Curry. Connect with Demetris at demetriscurry.com and subscribe to the Demetris Curry YouTube channel today.